We're thrilled to have welcomed our first grandbaby recently. But growing this precious human hasn't been easy on our daughter. The unrelenting pregnancy fatigue really took it out of her.
One thing that helped was keeping her fluids up, and she loved Rehydrate. Rehydrate is an essential electrolyte drink made by some great guys right here in Brizzy. It's safe during pregnancy and breastfeeding and is like a magical little energy and hydration boost for mum and bub.
If you're growing a little human or are just feeling a little run down, grab some at Coles today.
Avoidance actually blocks out something that we need to move towards. The more we can move towards those memories, the more we can process them, we can make meaning from them.
It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
I'm Dr. Justin Coulson, the author of 6 books about raising happy families, and I'm here with my wife, co-host, Mrs. Happy Families, Kylie.
So the other morning I had this interesting experience, I'll say, with the kids. One of our daughters came out of her bedroom and she was sobbing, hysterically sobbing. I had no idea what was going on, but once I realised I had to get a little bit of footage, and I have asked her permission. I'm going to share it with you because it was hilarious. What's wrong?
Nick's just died. He's like the best character in the book.
Oh, my darling.
Oh, my goodness. That's so good. So there's a character in a book that's died and she's lost the plot.
She is devastated.
She loves to read. She loves her. But this is a fictional book, right? This is not the real deal.
No, it's not. And it went on. I think we kind of had about 25 minutes because
Really?
she would calm down.
So this was my morning bike ride morning. I missed all the action.
You missed it all. She would calm down and then something would trigger. Someone would say something and she would just gush.
Did you give her a big hug?
I did give her a big hug.
Okay.
But there was definitely some laughter in there as well. And the funny thing is, even she recognizes how funny it is. And so she would start laughing because she would make herself, kind of realize that this was actually a bit crazy, that she was so hysterical. But her laughter would actually lead then into another bout of tears as she kind of started saying, but it's not funny. It's blah, 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 blah.
I love the recording. But this leads to something that happened just in the last couple of days with one of our other kids, our little one. During the last holidays, we went to Australia Zoo, which is the home of Steve Irwin, Bindi and Terry and Robert and all the crocodiles and all that kind of thing. And
it's such a great zoo. We've had so much fun going there.
Absolutely great zoo. And you bought the Terry Irwin memoir where she talks about her life with Steve.
It's such an incredible story. He's so iconic. We've seen the videos. We know how adventurous and crazy and passionate he was. But reading the story from Terry's point of view, there's no glory in it. There's just, this is life. This is exactly what it was like.
But it sounds, I can't wait to read it. Everything you've told me, I feel like I've read the book already. But he just sounds like he's just such a dead set, fair income character, and a bull at a gate, 1,000,000 miles an hour, and let's get up in the middle of the night and go catch crocs, and we'll just walk into the water, and it sounds like it's incredible. But you had this experience just after the tears of the fictional person dying. You've had this experience where you were having morning huggies with Emily, our 6-year-old, and she said, "Read to me, what are you reading?" So you started to read to her about Steve Irwin.
Yeah, I love that, she's still in this space where she just wants to kind of be close. And it doesn't happen very often, but every now and again she'll kind of just say, can you read out loud whatever you're reading? And, it could be Brené Brown or a novel that I'm reading, but she really wants to hear my voice, I guess, and be engaged. And
Unlike our big kids.
Who
don't want to hear anyone's voice except their own.
And so I started reading to her, and she's actually the reason we went to the zoo in the first place. She's really, loves animals and was desperate to get to the zoo. And so she was very much aware that this book was about Steve. And so I read to her about Steve and Terry's honeymoon, which was supposed to be in the beautiful, kind of western beaches of America, and she ends up saying yes to a crocodile hunt instead. And so I was reading this experience to Emily.
So she gives up the honeymoon so that she can go hunt crocs with Steve.
She gave up the honeymoon.
And he said, no honeymoon, let's go catch a croc.
Yes, that's exactly right. And what was so amazing in this whole experience is she's, other than being at the zoo once, where she was in an enclosure with a crocodile and fed it some meat, she actually has had no contact at this point with a crocodile, and they catch a crocodile that they needed to relocate.
And so you read all this to Emily?
I read all of this to Emily, and in the process of catching it, they had to take it out of the trap, the netting trap that they've trapped it in to kind of keep it safe, get all of the netting that he's tangled up in off him. And in order to do that, you've seen the videos, they're literally on top of
they jump on top of the
massive croc. So she's getting hands-on training like on the spot.
On her honeymoon.
And he says, all right, when I say you are going to jump on this crocodile's head.
Right.
You jump on a crocodile's head. So
he's holding the body, obviously.
No, he wasn't. Somebody else was. He's actually getting rid of all of the netting, like, lifting up its foot and pulling the netting off the foot and then, moving down like it was just.
Awesome story. So you've read that to Emily?
I've read that to Emily, and she's so enthralled. She just, this is so exciting. And then that led to, Mummy, can I watch some videos? And so, it's early morning and everybody's still asleep. And I thought, we can spend a few minutes kind of watching. So I looked up on YouTube to see if I could find some things. And there was lots of, big kind of documentary style 1 hour videos. So I was looking for something nice and small. And so I found a little 5-minute YouTube, and I thought, let's have a look at this. And what I didn't realize at that point was that it was actually kind of had been created as a bit of a tribute to Steve's life.
So it was like a montage of his life.
It was, and it was
Right.
so beautifully done. It was so beautifully done. But obviously at the end, they touch on the fact that now Steve's gone. And Emily was aware that Steve had died, and we'd had that conversation with her previously. But in that moment, it just hit her, and her heart, I'm going to cry, her heart was so crushed to think that this good person, she sees Steve Irwin as such a good man. He was fighting for the rights of, and the safety and the well-being of animals all around the world. And her heart just broke in that moment that he was gone. And she sobbed. And she just said to me, Mummy, why? Why did Steve have to die? He was such a good man. Why did he get in the water with those stingrays? Didn't he know they were dangerous? Why didn't the doctors fix his heart? Couldn't they have given him a new heart? How does that stingray think it would be if somebody came and stabbed him in the heart? The questions just kept rolling. And so as the morning progressed, she would just have bout after bout of just anguish as she kind of relived this space. And so the morning kind of turned into a bit of a Steve Irwin tribute, and Lily started looking up other YouTubes, and she found when Robert went over to the Jimmy Fallon show, and they had this really cool experience as he introduced Jimmy to a whole heap of scary animals, and, that kind of got her laughing a bit. And then she found True Blue, sung by John Williamson, in the Crocoseum on the day of their memorial, and that got me going. I was gone. But as we kind of, as the morning weaved on, we got on our bikes to ride to school, and all of a sudden it just hit her again, and she literally rode and sobbed the whole way to school.
Poor kid.
She just couldn't understand. And that actually led to, he died just like my grandma, Nana Bunt. And she wanted to, understand. Nana didn't even get to hold me for very long because Nana died pretty soon after she was born. She kind of hung around just for Emily. And just, so many questions and not good answers. I didn't have anything great to tell her. There was nothing that was going to fix her pain. And so I guess, how do we deal with this with our kids? Because from time to time, there are going to be experiences in their life where they lose someone or something that means so much to them. How do we help them through that anguish?
Let's talk about that next.
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
Are screens creating tension at home? Tweens, Teens and Screens is a webinar to guide families to healthy, safe super screen solutions. Buy it today at happyfamilies.com.au/shop.
It's the Happy Families podcast. We're talking about grief. We've had a couple of incidents where our children have grieved, one of them grieving over a fictional character in a book that died unexpectedly that she really didn't want to lose, and another one grieving the loss of Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, and that leading to conversation and questions around the loss of her great-grandma and some of the sadness and loss around that. So how are you supposed to talk to kids about grief? Where are you supposed to go? And what context? Like how much are you supposed to tell them? I reckon there's a handful of tips that I can share. I wish I'd been around to...
It would have been great if you were.
Yeah, that was my morning bike ride. It sounds like I go for bike rides every morning or something. I promise I am around to help with the kids. I was actually there when she was upset, but we had a kind of a complicated morning that morning. I reckon the first thing is you need to be simple and clear and direct in your conversation with your kids. I think that the best way to deliver any kind of bad news is to just say it. Say it gently, say it kindly, but just to say it. We need to keep it together ourselves. And then I think that we want to have one of those, I call it the Lion King moment. You know, the the Lion King. No, when we help kids to understand the whole circle of life thing, that everyone and everything gets old and eventually dies, what happens is they start to see death as normal and natural.
I think the tricky thing for Emily in this situation is Steve wasn't old.
No, you're right. And
this was such an unknown. This was such a surprise to everybody involved.
Yeah. And so in that situation, I think that the best thing that you can actually do is, well, sometimes we get really caught up in giving kids information. And in fact, even as I'm starting to give this information to you, I'm caught up in how do we convey the content? How do we help our children to understand what happened and why? But sometimes that's not the best thing to do. Sometimes we just need to provide the emotional support that they need and let them work through it themselves. And it might take them a minute or 10 minutes or an hour or a day or a week or a month. Sometimes we just need to be there for them. So we give them a great big hug and we say things like, "You're so sad. This is the saddest news ever." And we just hold them and let them cry. I think that it's also great to memorialize and say, well, let's go and learn everything we can. When we grieve, sometimes we try to avoid anything that could increase that sense of grief, that sense of loss, that sense of connection. We actually want to sever the connection when we're grieving sometimes because the connection is what hurts so much. And by severing the connection, we just get to say, okay, well, I loved that person, but now they're gone and I'm just going to move on with my life. But my sense is that avoidance just reinforces
The gaping hole.
Yeah. Well, in anxiety research, we know that avoidance actually reinforces anxiety. So if you're anxious about something and you avoid it, that avoidance just reinforces the anxiety. But in grief, avoidance doesn't help either. Avoidance actually blocks out something that we need to move towards. The more we can move towards those memories, the more we can process them, we can make meaning from them. And I think what's really going on here is we've got a little girl who wants to make meaning. So from my perspective, I think that bringing her in, bringing her close, showing her more videos, helping her to celebrate the extraordinary life of Steve Irwin in this case, and probably showing her some more pictures of her great-grandma and talking about the wonderful lady that our Nan was. I think that those are the kinds of things that are going to be much more useful, much more helpful in helping them to process that grief. A lot of people have cultural or religious beliefs that can provide them with support during times like this. And I think that during grief, one of the most powerful things we can do is lean on those cultural or faith-oriented beliefs and values and help them to guide us through those difficult times. There's so much research that shows that this is remarkable and powerful. So what did you do?
Well, we definitely had lots of cuddles and we had a little cry together. And one of the videos that we had watched had Steve telling his story. He was in a darkened room and it was just the spotlight on him. And he talked about his vision and how he had caught his parents' energy and drive for animal conservation as a young kid. And he had been the warrior and taken, kind of the baton off Dad and carried that flag throughout his life, and that his greatest hope was that he would be able to hand the baton on to his kids, and he would know that his life had meant something if his kids would be able to do that and continue his work. And that was such a beautiful tribute to who he was and the life that he led, because as we've seen with Bindi and Robert, that's exactly what they have done. That he has left this legacy that has, formed and molded them into these amazing conservation warriors. And they do him proud. And so as we talked about that, one of the things that I've loved about Emily is she has such a desire to make sure that animals are safe. And one of the things lately is she wants to pick up all the rubbish wherever we go. She wants to pick up rubbish because she doesn't want the animals to be hurt. And so we talked about how Steve's legacy lives in all of us as we do the things that he was so passionate about and strives so hard to educate us in.
And whether it's Steve Irwin or a relative, someone that your child loves and knows, that meaning making and that legacy is just critical. I think the last thing that I'd add is just that more than anything, our children need to know that we're there for them. They need to feel safe to cry or, hit a pillow or talk without any judgment. They actually need to be allowed to be happy too and to move on with their lives. Well, that was a great conversation. I'm really glad that we had it. It's probably something that we don't talk about nearly enough. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I hope that you got something out of this. If you did, please visit Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and a review. It's the reviews that help people to find the podcast and have happier families. Like this 5-star review that came through from Starry321, who said,
I've always enjoyed listening to Dr. Coulson, but this podcast has become my daily go-to with Kylie on board. Thank you both for your genuine and practical advice and being your authentic selves. Every parent and expecting parent should listen to your podcast.
I like that. Thank you so very much for the rating and review. Like I said, Apple Podcasts, the feedback helps other people to find the podcast. We really appreciate the work of Justin Rulon, who produces the podcast, and our executive producer is Craig Bruce. If you'd like more information about how to make your family happy or get through some tough spots, please have a look at our Happy Families memberships. They're available at happyfamilies.com.au, and for the price of a cuppa once a week, you can make your family happier. The family's getting bigger and bigger every day. You can also find more information at Dr. Justin Coulson's Happy Families on Facebook.